Welcome, listeners. We are so thankful to have our favorite marriage expert with us today. Brian, you have been so helpful. And in fact, you are um, my guest who's been on the most. So this is your third time.
Uh-huh.
And listeners, I just want you to know that I so appreciate Brian because he's actually helped me. Today's episode is going to talk all about infidelity and affairs, not a fun subject, but a
Right.
popular one that people have a lot of questions about. And Brian was kind enough to help me. We've got a list of questions, of common questions that people have about infidelity and affairs. And so we're going to talk all about that today and hopefully cover most of the information. But I mean, there's probably a lot more. So you can go to Brian if you need
Sure.
help with this too.
Sure. I'll try not to be too wordy.
Don't worry about it. Um, I mean, should we just start out with what constitutes infidelity
I mean,
and
sure.
what an affair?
Sure. I mean, I get lots of questions about what is an affair? What's the difference between a sexual affair and an emotional affair? Like what constitutes cheating? And in fact, kind of a funny anecdote, last week I was meeting with a couple, and the wife was just so adamant that she would never, ever be unfaithful to her husband, that that was so morally detestable. And it is. But then she proceeded to talk about a relationship with a girlfriend that felt almost like cheating to me, like the level of connection and the information she shared with her girlfriend about her husband and her unhappiness in her marriage. So what constitutes an affair really is uh, behaviors or actions that a reasonable spouse would find uncomfortable, would be uncomfortable with. So
Okay.
there's a transgression of some kind that a reasonable spouse, if they witnessed it, would feel uncomfortable about. So that could be
You're
flirting.
sounding like an attorney. It
It
sounds
could,
like legal.
well, yeah, I guess so. Um, Uh, and so that could be a look, it could be a touch, it could be a flirty, message. Um, and it also requires deceit. There's lying, hiding, deception.
Mhm.
So those two components are the main.
Okay.
Uh,
And that's infidelity.
right.
Okay, now let's go into how is an affair different than that?
Oh, well, and if it's an affair is a form of infidelity. Like we can be unfaithful to our spouse in many ways. So an
So do
affair.
you go oh, I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so affairs have a sexual nature. I don't make a big distinction between emotional affairs and sexual affairs because I think all affairs are sexual in nature. Anticipation, a touch can be just as erotic and sexual as intercourse can be. So I don't think that there's a big distinction. Emotional affairs are at their core sexual. Um,
So do you find that both are just as difficult to heal from?
Oh, sure, sure, absolutely. It's and it's really that the behaviors and actions are one thing, but the behavior that's hardest to get past is the lying, is the deceit.
Mhm.
That's what's so destructive. It's not the behavior. Everyone, I mean, everyone likes to feel good. It's not hard to understand why affairs happen. Um, what's so destructive to the relationship, again, it's the lying and the erosion of trust.
So I'm jumping ahead to a different
Sure.
question, but can marriages heal from an affair? And if so,
Yeah, thank
how?
goodness. Yes. In fact, transformation usually starts with crisis. It's
Right.
sometimes impossible get to change unless there's some sort of problem or crisis. And so an affair sends a marriage into crisis. Of course, it's traumatic, and it can lead. I love it when it leads to a real transformative process
Mhm.
and of change for that couple. No
That is a
guarantees, of course, but it's
right.
definitely.
And, I'm sure it's dependent on each individual
Yeah,
situation.
there's really important factors that need to go into, and I can talk about that now, like what each person needs to do if healing is what they want. I mean, it is a choice. Some people will say that's just a hard line. I can never, forgive that, and I respect that. I think that's fine. It's an affair is it's a breach of trust that is undeniable. But there's many ways that we uh, are not faithful to our spouse. I mean, we
Mhm.
make promises, both spoken and unspoken, to be lovers and confidants and to be fun and loyal, but then we're not in so many ways. And so to cheat is a betrayal that's traumatic and horrible, but it's not the only form of betrayal. So I try to help people see, look at themselves, that uh, nobody deserves to be cheated on, um, uh, and it's never the hurt partner's fault that the affair happened. But more often than not, there's aspects of the relationship that were not healthy, and so if a person is willing and able to let the crisis, traumatic, acute phase after the disclosure of the affair or finding out work its way through so that you can actually start to think again and see a future and look into the past with a curious and mind and a desire to learn, that there's a tremendous amount to learn about yourself, about your spouse, asking questions like, why did this happen? What made you decide to do it? What did you get out of it? What did you think was not working for us? Why couldn't you tell me that then? These are such important questions that are different than, why are you such a mother effer? Um,
Right.
that's an understandable question, but it's a very black and white frame of perpetrator victim.
Yep.
Um, and that's one way to look at it, but that's not a healing way to look at it. So again, everyone has a right to be angry and traumatized, and it's never the hurt partner's fault. But if they're willing to move past that phase and explore, then that's where real healing will happen. Of course, the offending partner um, needs to be, step up and take full accountability in order for that to happen. I mean, there can't be any um, blaming of the hurt partner for the affair. You can blame the relationship for sure, but that the offending partner needs to take full accountability, all of it. None of this drip, drip, drip
Right.
disclosure where it takes forever to finally get the full details, and learn, what made them act in such an entitled and non-compassionate and hurtful way.
Right. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that I kind of am hearing three things that you need. And one is just kind of encompasses all that they'll both work. They're both willing to work
Yeah,
because sometimes I'm sure that's not the case. And then you've just got to help someone heal through it.
sure.
Um, so then the person who had the affair needs to take full accountability.
Hmm.
And then the person who was wronged, or however you want to say it, needs to kind of be open to allowing it to heal and maybe open to forgiveness.
Oh yeah, it's a choice to
Yeah.
trust. Yeah, it's another way to frame this is An affair rocks an affair disclosure rocks your world. I mean, the reality that you knew is no longer exists. It's horribly
Right.
traumatic.
Right.
And so, you can't trust. I mean, it's sort of you get to look face to face with reality that you thought you could trust, and then you found out you actually can't. And that is a more, I mean, it's painful, but it's also an opportunity to grow up and grow into a kind of more adult, realistic way of looking at your relationship, that we are both humans. And I may have been relying on my husband or my wife to make me feel good and bring love and passion and excitement and creativity. And instead he went somewhere else to look for that. You know, why did that happen? And what does that mean about me and him? So then you can choose to trust and choose to forgive if there's good enough reasons to do that. You know, not everyone will and not everyone should, but there's
Right.
reasons to.
Okay, so now let me ask, say we've got someone here listening who's needing to build the trust again. I mean,
Yeah.
they're actually the person who had the affair,
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
other party is wanting to work on it. How does that person who had the affair build trust with their partner
Yeah.
again after this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, full accountability, answer all the questions. Um, and if and I can say more about the right and wrong questions, but answer all the questions. Don't be evasive. Um, what else?
Can you
You
tell
can,
me a little bit more? You said answer all the right questions.
yeah. I mean, in that acute, painful phase, often spouses will just want to know everything and all the details. And some people, it does help to get all the details. It actually calms them down. But in most cases, you know, if you're obsessing about it, which of course you would be, asking more questions is just going to make you obsess more and give you more information to obsess about. So
Right.
when I'm working with these folks, I mean, I honor a person's right to ask questions, and I think they have that right and should get answers. But I caution them about why they're asking and what they really want to know. So, you know, if you want to know, you know, where you slept together and how many times and how awesome it was, then that's your right to ask. But that's going to be painful information that then you live with for the
Right.
rest of your life. Instead asking questions. The right question would be, how in the hell can I trust you again, ever?
Right.
And so, you know, what can we do? What are you willing to do to help me build that trust? And so, back to that question, um, some people might call this surveillance behavior. I call it reassuring behavior. That the affair partner, or the involved affair partner, um, gives information to reassure the hurt partner. So, phone tracking, taking little snaps or pictures so you can verify where you are, looking at email accounts. I mean, if that were a permanent thing, that might be problematic, but definitely in the first 6 months or a year after an affair, to rebuild trust, that's, I think, very reasonable, reassuring, helpful. But showing up, you know, it. I'm going to answer another question here. Is like,
Yeah.
how long does it take? A
I was
long
just going to ask that.
a
Thank you.
long time. Like, I would say 2 to 5 years is not unreasonable, and it's kind of similar to grief, where you're grieving the loss of your old marriage, or your old reality, and your old form of trust, and accepting and living into a new marriage. Now, that new marriage has the potential to be even better than the one
Well,
before,
that's a great statement.
and that's the vision. Um, because, and here, let me tell you why. Um, if you affairs involve creativity, passion, love, excitement, mystery, validation. We are so good at giving validation and receiving it in that space in an affair. But it doesn't have a lot of virtue because it's under the umbrella of deceit. So
Right.
if you can bring that energy into your marriage, you have that
Right.
potential. And if both spouses can bring that or choose to bring that energy to the marriage, then that's the kind of marriage that both people want. Not everyone will, but I think that's who I'm speaking to. That's what
Right.
both people want. The first phase, that acute phase, it lasts, a matter of weeks or months. When I am working with someone and a spouse is just stuck in the pain of it, in the hurt, obsessing over the affair, like that becomes the whole story, is that they were cheated on and their marriage is a lie. That's not sustainable. And again, it's just too black and white, perpetrator, victim, he's an asshole and I'm a victim. Or we could switch the genders, but often it's, that's the gendered way
Right.
that it goes. But the transformative stage, that's what lasts 2 to 5 years, where you're still actively working on creating and living into a new marriage that is not the same one as before, because you can't go back after an affair. And I don't know if I said this in a previous podcast, but Esther Perel is a marriage therapist that I really look up to and talks a lot about affairs. And she said every modern marriage that lasts, or she said every human has at least 2 or 3 marriages over his or her lifetime. That can be with 2 or 3 people, or it can be with the same person. We just can't
Ah,
stay the same as we were in our 20s and 30s.
well, and it's interesting because I was thinking about, friends and family that I know. And sometimes if there's been infidelity and they kind of like say they've overcome it, but they really haven't gotten help. So they're going along in their marriage, but there's still such an
Yeah.
unhealed. So when I'm looking at that, if
Mhm.
that's, fine, that's working. But if they jumped in and did the work,
Mhm.
it'd
That's
probably
right.
be 2 to 5 years longer to
Yeah.
heal it,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah, because you have to face some hard stuff. Like there's, I would say, 3 different outcomes after. Well, if you stay together, there's 3
Okay.
outcomes after an affair. The first one is the endless perpetrator victim model. He's never going to be off the hook. Always going to be
Yep.
in the doghouse. I can never trust him again.
Yep.
To me, that would be a miserable way to stay together for both people.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and it wouldn't be just the hurt partner's fault. The affair, the person who or did the affair may be stuck in the marriage was bad, so I deserve to do what I did. I
Right.
mean, that's a pretty unhealthy, stuck black and white frame
Right.
too. So the middle road is kind of where you just pull up your bootstraps, decide that it's better to stay together because there is love, there is warmth, there was accountability, and you build back trust, and you stay, the kids, you don't want them to be hurt.
Yeah.
But there's not real change. It kind of is still the kind of marriage that is, it's loyal and it can be warm, but it's sort of dull and domestic and predictable, and the sex isn't great. And then the third
Not
would be
intimate. Yeah. How would you be really intimate, right?
yeah. I mean, there may be intimacy, but it's not full intimacy. It's not fierce intimacy where you're looking at each other face to face. Again, in the way that kind of an affair feels like. Uh,
Right.
mhm.
And I have another question that popped into my head, and I think you probably had it written down too. Um, are there good marriages where an affair happens?
um, yeah, yes. I mean, sadly, there are. in my experience, not too common. I don't see that very much. Usually there's some underlying stuff. But no, I mean, we humans are narcissistic or can be, and want what we want and talk ourselves into having a little cake and eating it too.
Right.
And so often, I think when that's the case, the person who cheated is dealing with some narcissism and entitlement, and can be a super nice, warm, loving, loyal person in the living room, but then goes out the back door and has a little fun on the side.
Right.
And that is, I think still like there's some honesty and fierce intimacy and missing from that marriage, but I wouldn't call it a bad marriage.
Okay.
You know what
All
I
right.
mean?
Well, okay. So then I think you talked about this a little bit, but one of the questions that you had written down is, was it ever the person's fault who was cheated on?
Yeah. No.
And you said that no one deserves that.
Yeah. No. It's never your fault in any way that your spouse cheated. It's your fault that the marriage wasn't or partly your fault that the marriage was lacking in certain ways, but it's not like that doesn't mean that you deserve what happened. There's much
Right.
better ways to fix those problems than to have an affair.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
not a respectable, redeemable way to do it.
So it's not the cheated partner's fault
No,
ever.
no.
Okay. That's good because I think people
Mm.
carry that. And I think you answered this one already on how do I know if I should stay and work on it after an affair. And I think we talked about how both people have to be in. There
Yeah.
has to be accountability. You have to. So those are kind of that answers that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and some people will choose to stay even if there's not a lot of the things they're looking for. It's kind of a ratio of, is there enough good here to make putting up with the bad worth it?
Right.
It's the same question anyone in a rough marriage, hard marriage would be asking
Right.
themselves.
Right. Okay. Now your next question is jumping out at me because you know how much I love kids and keeping them.
Yeah.
How does an affair affect your children?
If they know about it a lot,
Right.
it's hugely then traumatic for them as well. And I really try to encourage people not to tell the kids, but that's hard. The hurt spouse will often spill the beans, and then it is quite. I wouldn't say necessarily damaging, although that could be, but certainly traumatic, painful, stressful, and could become damaging if not addressed. But even if they're not told, they're going to pick up on the tension in
Right.
the marriage because there is going to be a lot of tension.
Yep.
If they don't, if the affair is still secret and nobody knows about it, well, then I don't know. It might not affect them. That's more of a,
Right.
does a bad marriage affect children?
Exactly. Exactly. So
Mhm.
probably if they know or found out, maybe want to talk to someone like you,
Yeah, yeah. I,
might be, yeah.
not to toot my own horn here. I mean, there's really good resources out there. I can mention a few books. But I think this is such a hard thing, but the potential is so good if you want it, that working with a good therapist that's comfortable working with affairs is a really good idea, worth the investment,
Yeah.
worth the time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, this time has gone so fast, Brian. I can't even believe it. I do want to hear the books that you recommend,
Okay.
but I just want to leave listeners, if there's a listener who's been involved and whose spouse has had an affair, how can they start to heal? I mean, you talk about, I mean, and I know like you have to sit with your feelings, even if they're
Yeah.
horrible. They're not going
Yeah.
to kill you. But what can you give any advice? And I know
Yeah.
one of them is to get a therapist, surround
Yeah.
yourself with people who love you. But what else can they, is there anything that you could leave them with after listening to this?
Yes. My standard answer to that is you need two people, not a lot. Like one would be okay, three would be okay, but two people who you can trust and tell about this. They need to be people that aren't going to fan the flames. They're not going to uh, tell anyone else. You can trust them, and they're just going to be there to listen and be your confidants. You, if you're having trouble sleeping and eating, then see your doctor and get some medication so that you
Yeah,
can
it
sleep.
helps pull you through.
Yeah, like that's so reasonable. You need sleep and you need to be able to eat in order to sit in those feelings and move through them.
And
I
something
think,
jumped. Oh, sorry. I just want to
yeah,
say one thing
go
jumped
ahead.
out at. We're having streaming issues. I think I'm talking over you a little. Sorry about that. And now I lost my thought. I lost my thought on it.
Oh,
So you go
no.
ahead and say what you were going to say, and I know what I was going to say. You said have 1 to 3 people that you can talk to about it. I was just going
Mhm.
to add, not your kids, not even
No,
if they're
no.
adults. Do
Yeah,
not, even if it's your
yeah,
best friend. No.
yeah. They can't be your kids,
Yeah.
and they probably shouldn't be your spouse's mom.
Yeah.
Although that's possible in the right circumstance, but no, a
Yeah.
friend or a sibling is who I'm talking about.
All right. And
So
in
the books that are really good, State of Affairs is written by Esther Perel, Perel. Um, that's fantastic. Terry Real has written a couple books. I can't remember I should have can't remember the title that he
That's
has
okay.
his affair book, but his The New Rules of Marriage is kind of his classic marriage book. But
Okay.
author Terry or Terrence Real, Real, is the
I
author.
will put that information in the show notes, and I will put your website there so that if people want to work with you, and I know you can do this virtually now,
Right.
correct? I mean,
Yes.
it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be someone who's in Minnesota or Wisconsin.
Yes, I can work with anybody, anywhere, via the web.
All right.
The brave new
Brian,
world.
thank you so much. I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, this information is hard, but it's going to help so many people who are going through this. So I just appreciate your adding value to the world by sharing this.
Well, thank you, and likewise, you're doing good work.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. I'm sure I'll have you back.
Okay.
All
Look
right.
forward to it.
Take care, Brian.
Bye-bye.